Everyone in that hall knew which door not to open. I was the only one who hadn't been warned. But that is not where I want to start. I want to start with the night the whole court went silent. He was on his knees on the dais, and the cup was already falling. I remember the sound it did not make, no clatter, because I caught it against my palm before it struck stone, and the wine that should have been in his blood by morning ran down my wrist instead. 100 faces, his among them, looking up at me with an expression I had no name for yet. Lady Sorrel's voice, high and certain, saying the word witch. And the king's wolf, enormous and gold-eyed, stepping between me and every blade in the room before its own master could rise. I did not know, in that moment, whether I had just saved his life or ended mine. Let me go back. It started 3 weeks before any of that, with a door I was told to sweep past and did not. I had been in the king's household 4 days when they sent me to the wrong wing. That is the honest version. The healer's mistress, a brisk woman named Edda, who had inherited me the way one inherits a draft, handed me a tray of clean linen and a pot of steeped willow, and told me to leave it outside the third door and not to knock. I was 22 years old, newly bound to a household I had not chosen, the lowest ranked person in a fortress full of wolves who could hear my heartbeat from across a corridor. Omega. The word followed me like a smell I could not wash off. In the village I came from, it meant gentle hands and a soft throat. Here, it meant last to eat and first to be forgotten. I had made peace with that. Peace is cheaper than pride, and I could not afford pride. What I could not make peace with was a wound left to rot behind a closed door because everyone was too frightened to tend it. Because I could smell it. Even through oak, even under the smoke and pine of the pack house, I could smell the particular sweetness of a wound that had been dressed wrong and left too long. My grandmother taught me that smell before she taught me my letters. It means someone is dying slowly enough that the people around them have stopped noticing. So I knocked. Nobody had told me that the third door in that corridor was the one door in the entire kingdom you did not open. Nobody had told me the man behind it was the Alpha King, Halvar of the Iron Territories, the strongest wolf alive, who had turned away every healer sent to him for 2 years and sent the last one out with a scar she would carry to her grave. Nobody had told me he did not permit anyone to see him weak, because a weak alpha is a dead alpha, and a dead alpha is a leaderless pack, and a leaderless pack is a war. I knew none of it. I knocked, and when no one answered, I went in. The room was dark and cold as a cellar. The fire burned down to sullen orange. And in the bed, propped against the headboard like a felled tree someone had leaned upright, was the largest man I had ever seen, watching me with eyes the colour of a coin held to a flame. "You are not Edda," he said. "No," I agreed. I set the tray down. "Edda is afraid of you. I don't have the seniority to be afraid of you yet. Give me a week." I did not know he was the king. I want that understood. I thought he was some old warrior the household kept out of sight, some uncle too proud to die politely. If I had known, I would still have gone in, but I would not have said that, and he knew it. And I think that was the first thing about me that he could not put down. He did not laugh, but something moved at the corner of his mouth that he had clearly forgotten how. "The wound on your side is killing you," I said, because there was no point being delicate about a smell that filled the room. "May I look at it?" It was not a question. He noticed that too. His jaw worked. No one looks at it. Then no one has been doing their job. I was already rolling my sleeves. I'm new. I haven't learned yet which jobs I'm allowed to refuse. There is a particular silence a powerful man makes when he has forgotten what it is like to be spoken to as though he is simply a person with a problem that has a solution. I have come to know that silence very well. That night, it was only a stranger's silence, and I filled it with the practical noise of a healer at work, unstopping the willow, tearing linen, asking him to turn toward the light. And here is the thing I have never told anyone. When I peeled back the old dressing, and the wound was exactly as bad as my nose had promised, a deep, ragged thing along the ribs that should have closed months ago and had instead been kept open like a mouth that would not stop speaking. I did not flinch. Not because I am brave, because I was concentrating. Fear is a luxury of people who have the leisure to imagine outcomes. I had a wound in front of me and 2 hands, and the 2 occupy the whole of a person if you let them. He watched me not flinch, and something in the room, something that was not the man, went very still and very attentive. The way a wolf goes still when it has heard a sound it has been waiting years to hear. I would learn what that stillness was soon enough. I cleaned it, I packed it, I told him it would have to be reopened properly and drained, and that it would hurt, and that I would not lie to him about the hurting, because people who lie to you about pain cannot be trusted about anything. He listened. When I finished and stood to go, he spoke to my back. "What is your name?" "Ren." "Ren." He said it the way you test the weight of a blade you did not expect to like. "You truly do not know who I am." "You're the man in the 3rd room," I said, "who is going to let me back in tomorrow. Because your side is going to feel worse before it feels better, and you're going to want the one healer who isn't scared of your temper." I paused at the door. "Whoever you are." I found out who he was the next morning, when Edda saw where I had come from and dropped an entire tray of tinctures. The whole household knew by midday. The Omega. The new one. The one who walked into the king's sick room and walked back out with all her skin. They looked at me in the corridors the way you look at someone standing on thin ice who does not appear to know it. Osric found me by the well before noon, the king's second, a broad, quiet man with a scar through one eyebrow and the wary patience of someone who has spent years managing a grief he is not permitted to name. "You went into the 3rd room," he said. "I did. Do you understand what you did?" "I dressed a wound that 6 of your healers were too frightened to touch," I said, "and I'm going back this afternoon to do it again. Because it is going to kill him inside the month if someone does not, and I would rather it not be on the week I arrived." I hauled my bucket up. "Is there a reason you'd prefer he die tidily behind a closed door? Because I've met men like that, and I've never understood them." Osric looked at me for a long moment. Whatever he had come to warn me away from, he set it down. "He let you back in," he said, half to himself. "He has not let anyone back in since." He stopped. That stop had a shape to it, a person-shaped hole. I noticed it and filed it away, the way I file away everything I am not yet meant to understand. "Since who?" I said. "Come to the hall tonight," Osric said instead. "The king takes his meal there when he is well enough to sit. He has not been well enough in some time. If he is tonight, it will be because of you, and the court will need to see who did it." A grim flicker. "Wear something you don't mind being looked at in." I owned 2 dresses. I wore the less patched one, and I told myself I was not nervous, which is the particular lie you tell yourself right before you learn how nervous you are. The Great Hall of the Iron Territories is built to make you feel small, and it succeeds. Stone the colour of a storm cloud, a fire pit you could roast an ox in, and at the head of it, a throne carved into the shape of a rising wolf, so that whoever sat there sat in the jaws of it. Long tables, 100 wolves who had all heard the story of the Omega and had all come to look at her. And on the table, at the king's right hand, beside his own cup, a second cup. Empty. Turned very slightly inward, the way you set a place for someone. No one touched it. No one filled it. No one looked at it. Which is how I knew everyone in that hall was always looking at it. I did not know whose it was. I would. The king came in on his own feet, which I gathered was a thing that had not happened in weeks, and I watched a room of hardened warriors try to hide their shock behind their cups. He was pale and moving like a man carrying something heavy and invisible, but he was upright, and his eyes found me at the low end of the hall before he had taken 3 steps. That was mistake enough. An Alpha King does not look for the lowest ranked person in the room. But it was not the king who disgraced us both. It was his wolf. I had not seen him shift. I did not see it then. He did not shift, not fully, that is the point. The great gold beast simply seemed to arrive, pacing out from behind the throne as though it had been waiting, and the hall went silent, in the particular way a hall goes silent when the natural order has just been broken over someone's knee. The wolf came straight down the length of the great hall, past the nobles, past the ranked warriors, past Lady Sorrel, who half rose with her hand extended and her chin lifted, and every expectation on her face that the beast was coming to her. She was the most beautiful woman in the room, and had been raised, I would learn, to be the Luna of the Iron Territories since before she could walk. The wolf did not so much as slow for her. It came to me, at the very foot of the tables, and it lay down across my feet with a thud that shook the trestles. And it put its enormous head in my lap, and it sighed the sigh of an animal that has finally set down a weight it has carried alone for 2 years. I sat there with the king's wolf in my lap, and 100 wolves staring, and my hand, of its own accord, coming to rest on that great gold skull, as though it were any frightened creature I had ever gentled. At the head of the hall, the king had gone the colour of ash. He opened his mouth. He closed it. For the strongest wolf alive, he looked in that moment exactly like a man whose dog has done something unforgivable in front of important guests, and who has no earthly idea how to explain that the dog is smarter than he is. He does not, Halvar said, and stopped. His voice was not working correctly. He does not do that. He seems fairly certain that he does, I said, and the wolf's tail thumped once against the stone, and somewhere down the table, a young warrior made the fatal mistake of laughing, and then could not stop. And then the whole low end of the hall was shaking with the kind of helpless laughter that only escapes when everyone has been frightened for a very long time, and is suddenly, absurdly, not. The king of the Iron Territories stood in the jaws of his wolf throne and watched his own beast choose a kitchen-adjacent omega in front of his entire court and could not command it back. And I understood 2 things at once. The first was that I was in more danger now than I had ever been in my life. The second was that his wolf had known something about me for exactly 1 day, and his mouth had not caught up to it. And I was going to spend a great deal of time watching the distance between the 2. If you want to know what his wolf knew, and whether I survived what Lady Sorrel did about it, because a woman raised her whole life to be queen does not lose the throne to a healer's apprentice quietly, then stay with me. Follow this one to the end. The court had already decided how my story went. They were wrong about nearly all of it, and so was I. Lady Sorrel came to the healer's quarters the next morning. She did not come to threaten me. She was cleverer than that. She came to warn me, she said, out of kindness, because I clearly did not understand. You are not the first, she said, drifting through my still room, touching my jars with one gloved finger, as though checking for dust. His beast has done this before. It is grief, you understand, not a bond. Grief makes a wolf strange. It attaches to whatever is nearest. She smiled at me, and it was a lovely smile, and it was made entirely of ice. The last one it attached to, he nearly killed. Did they tell you that? He does not remember doing it. His wolf does not know its own strength when the wound speaks. She survived, barely. A pause, precisely weighted. I would hate for a sweet, brave thing like you to learn that lesson." She left me with that, and I will admit it did what she meant it to do. It sat in my chest like a stone all day, because it explained the door. It explained the 2 years of turned-away healers, the room kept dark, the second who could not finish his sentences. It explained why a man would rather rot than be touched. Not pride, not temper. He was not protecting his dignity behind that door. He was protecting whoever might come through it. And I understood, then, that everyone in that hall who had warned me which door not to open had been telling me the wrong story. They thought the danger was that he would hurt me. They had it exactly backward. The danger was that he would rather die than risk it. And no one, in 2 years, had loved him enough or been foolish enough to call that what it was. Cowardice, dressed up as protection. I have a low tolerance for it. I discovered that about myself that day. So I went back to the 3rd room, and I reopened the wound properly, the way it should have been done 2 years before. And it was as bad as I had promised him. His whole body locked. The gold wolf paced the walls. And at the worst of it, when I had my hands inside a hurt that would have made a battlefield surgeon blanch, the room went cold. Not chilly. Cold the way a grave is cold. Frost bloomed on the inside of the window in the middle of a summer morning, and the air thickened until it was like breathing wet wool, and the king's eyes rolled to me, gold and enormous and afraid, not of the pain, of me being near it. "Get back," he said, and his voice had the wolf in it, doubled, wrong. "Wren, get back. It does not. I cannot always." "No," I said. The frost crept across the floor toward my knees. My grandmother had a word for this. Some wounds are not only in the flesh. Grief that is refused long enough stops being a feeling and starts being a weather. And it will do what any storm does to whatever will not get out of its way. "Your wolf will not hurt me," I said, through teeth that wanted to chatter, keeping my hands exactly where they were. It has been trying to get me into this room for 2 years, and it finally managed it. It is not going to waste that. You do not know what it did. I know what it did. The cold was in my bones now, a deep ache like winter arriving early inside me, and I did not move. It kept you alive. That's what a wolf does. And this wound, Halvar, look at me. This wound is not infected. I lied to you the first night, or I was wrong, one of the two. It is clean. It has been clean for a long time. I had understood it only as I said it, the way I understand most true things. Your wolf will not let it close. That is what I have been fighting. Not rot. Your own beast, holding the edges open, because... I stopped. Because I had seen, at last, what the wound was. It was not one wound. It was 2 blade marks side by side, and between them a 3rd mark that was not a blade at all, the print of a hand. A large hand. As though someone had held the wound shut with his own palm in the last moments of his life, and the wolf had made a monument of the place that hand had been. The 2nd cup. The person-shaped hole in Osric's sentence. The empty seat at the king's right hand, turned very slightly inward. Who held this closed? I whispered. The king of the Iron Territories, the strongest wolf alive, turned his face to the wall so I would not see it break, and said one word. Aldric. His brother. I did not need to be told the rest. A younger brother, a shared battle, a hand pressed to a mortal wound that was never his own. Aldric had died with his palm against Halvar's ribs, holding his king, his brother, together with the last of himself. And Halvar's wolf, which loved with an animal's absolute refusal to accept loss, had decided that if the wound closed, the last of Aldrich, closed with it. So it kept the door of his own body open, for 2 years, bleeding rather than forget. That was the moment everything in me that had been wary went quiet, and something harder took its place. Because you cannot heal that with willow and clean linen, and I was not going to leave it. I understood, kneeling in the frost with my hands full of a grief that had learned to bleed, that I had walked through the one door in the kingdom no one else would open, and I was not walking back out and leaving him alone in the cold. I did not decide it. It was already decided, the way his wolf had already decided about me. "Then we don't close it yet," I said. My voice had changed. I heard it change. "We keep it open on purpose, together, where I can see it, instead of you keeping it open in secret until it kills you. You don't get to grieve him by dying slowly in a dark room, Halvar. That's not honouring him. That's just making the pack bury 2 of you." The frost stopped its crawl. "Aldrich held you together with his hand. Fine. I have 2. I'll hold it. But you have to let me in the room." The gold wolf stopped pacing. It came and lay down against my back, warm as a hearth. And the cold went out of the air all at once, and behind me on the bed, the king of the Iron Territories wept, the way a man weeps who has not permitted himself to for 2 years, silently, enormously, ashamed and unable to stop. I did not turn around. Some things you give a person by not watching them. "There is a second cup at your table," I said instead, to the wall, so he would have something to answer that was not the size of what had just happened. Everyone pretends not to see it. It is his. I know. I finished the dressing. My hands had never stopped. "You should fill it sometime. An empty cup says he's gone. A full one says he was here." I sat back on my heels. Grief and pride wear the same coat, in my experience. It's very hard to tell them apart in a dark room. Easier in the light. He did not answer for a long time. When he did, his voice had come back to itself, roughened. "No one speaks to me the way you do." "That's their loss and your bad luck," I said, and stood, and my knees ached with cold, and my hands ached with use, and I felt more myself than I had since I arrived. "I'll come tomorrow. Fill the cup tonight. That's not a healer's order. It's just advice you're free to ignore, like all the good advice I've ever given anyone." The corner of his mouth did the thing it had forgotten how to do. This time it remembered all the way. What followed, over the next days, was the most ridiculous courtship in the history of the Iron Territories, and I was only half a participant in it, because the other party was a wolf. The king himself did not court me. He did not know how, and I think he did not believe he was allowed to, a man that steeped in grief. But his wolf had no such scruples, and his wolf was, I regret to report, a menace. It began with my missing hairpin turning up on the king's own pillow, which mortified him so thoroughly that Osric had to leave the room. It escalated. The wolf took to lying across my threshold at night, so that I stepped over 100 pounds of alpha beast every morning. And every morning the king would appear in the corridor, rigid with dignity, to inform me that it would not happen again. And every night it happened again. Once, at a full council, in front of every lord of the territories, the wolf padded the length of the chamber and set a single winter rose on the map table directly in front of my chair. Where had it even found a rose? And then sat down and looked at its own king with an expression of frank expectation. And Halvar put his face in his hand and did not speak for the rest of the session. I laughed until I cried in the still room afterward. It is a very particular joy, being chosen that badly by something that cannot help itself, while the man it belongs to stands 3 paces away, going quietly out of his mind. Because that was the tension of it. And it was better than any nearness. He stood 3 paces away when one would do. He handed me a book on wound law across the width of a table, when he could have passed it to my hand. He held my eyes across the great hall until the holding said everything, and then broke it deliberately. Always him, always first, because he had decided he did not have the right, and his wolf had decided he was an idiot. And the second cup, from the second night onward, was full. I noticed. I did not remark on it. Some things you give a person by not watching them. Osric found me again by the well, a week on. He looked younger. It frightened me a little. How much lighter a man can look when a grief he has guarded finally has help carrying it. "Whatever you are doing," he said, "do not stop." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm just the only one who didn't know which door to avoid." "No." He shook his head slowly. "Everyone knew which door to avoid. You're the only one who decided the man behind it was worth the risk. There's a difference." He looked at me steadily. "There are those at court who noticed that too, and they are not glad of it." He meant Sorrel. I knew he meant Sorrel. What I did not yet know was how far a woman raised to be a queen will go when the throne walks past her outstretched hand for the second time in her life. I found out at the naming. It is an old ceremony of the Iron Territories, a formal court gathering where the king confirms the standings of his household for the year. Who is raised, who is kept, who is cast down. Halvar, well enough now to hold court, well enough now to laugh once in a while where people could hear it, had called it for the first time in 2 years. The whole territory came. I stood at the low end of the hall in my less patched dress, because I was still an Omega, still the lowest ranked person in the room, and I had no expectation of being named at all. Lady Sorrel had other plans. She rose before the king could speak. It was a breach of every custom, and she made it look like grace. She held a cup, a beautiful thing, chased silver, and she offered it up the hall toward the dais, toward the king, and she spoke in a voice pitched to carry to the farthest wall. "A gift for my king," she said, "to his health, to his recovery, and to the healer who restored it." The word came out of her like a splinter. "Let him drink to her, before us all, and settle the question the whole court is asking." It was cleverly done. To refuse was to insult her house. To make me drink was beneath the dignity of the moment. So of course he would drink, the king, to end it graciously, and none of us, would think about the fact that Lady Sorrel's grandmother had been the most gifted poisoner in 3 territories, and that skill is a thing that runs in blood. I knew. I do not fully know how I knew. A healer knows the smell of most things that kill, and under the wine and the crushed mint there was the faintest ghost of something bitter, something my grandmother had made me memorize with a switch across my knuckles. Monkshood. Enough to stop a heart and be called a bad night's rest by morning. The cup went up the hall, hand to hand, toward the king, who was already reaching for it with the easy courtesy of a man ending an awkward scene. I did not shout. Shouting would have been the end of me, the Omega accusing a lady of the king's court, on a feeling, in front of the whole territory. They would have called it exactly what Sorrel needed them to call it: jealousy, ambition, witchery. She had built the trap so that any noise I made snapped it shut on my own throat. So I did not make noise. I walked. I walked up the length of the great hall, past the nobles, past the ranked warriors, the way the wolf had once walked toward me, and I reached the dais just as the cup reached the king's hand. And I did the only thing that could not be argued with. I took it from him, and I struck it out of the air. The cup fell. I caught it against my palm before it hit the stone. I do not know why. Habit. A healer catches things. And the poisoned wine ran down my wrist instead of into his blood. And the hall erupted, and Lady Sorrel's voice rose above all of it, high and certain and triumphant. because I had just handed her the ending she wanted. "Witch!" she cried. "She strikes the cup from the king's own hand. She cannot bear him honoured. Seize her!" And that is where the night I began with began. Because the king came down off the dais, not up in fury, down, onto his knees, on the stone in front of the whole court, and took my wine-soaked wrist in both his enormous hands, and did not look at Sorrel, and did not look at his guards, and looked only at me. "What was in the cup?" he said. Quiet, just for me. But his wolf said it for the whole hall. The gold beast came out from behind the throne and stood between me and every drawn blade in the room, hackles high, and it turned its head and looked at Lady Sorrel, and it snarled, not at me, at her. The whole court watched the king's wolf name the threat, and it was not the Omega.
"Monkshood," I said. My voice did not shake. I was proud of that later.
"Enough to be called a bad night's rest by morning. Smell it yourself, my king. It's on my skin now instead of in your heart. You're welcome to be angry with me for the striking of your cup. I'll take the punishment for the discourtesy gladly." I lifted my chin. "I would rather be flogged for insolence than bury you for manners." The hall had gone utterly silent. Halvar lifted my wrist. He smelled the wine. And I watched the king of the Iron Territories understand, in front of his entire court, exactly how close he had come, and exactly who had stepped between him and it, and exactly who had planned it. He rose. He did not let go of my hand. "Lady Sorrel," he said, and his voice was the one I had heard through the wound, doubled, the wolf in it, and it filled the hall to the rafters. "You will be escorted to the Eastern Tower tonight, and to the border by dawn. And if you are found within the Iron Territories after that, my wolf will settle the question the whole court is asking." "Do you understand what it is asking?" She did not answer. She had gone the colour of ash. I knew that colour. I had seen it on him, in a dark room, a lifetime ago. "It is asking," Halvar said, "why anyone thought this woman was the danger in my hall." He turned. He was still holding my hand, in front of all of them, and he did the thing his wolf had been trying to make him do for weeks, the thing his grief had told him he had no right to. He raised my hand to his mouth and he pressed his lips to my wine-stained knuckles. One breath, no more. The kind of kiss that is a sentence and not a scene. And what broke open in me was not desire, though there was that, buried under everything. It was recognition. The vertiginous, unbelievable recognition of being seen all the way down by someone who had every reason to keep his eyes closed, and choosing, in front of the world that made him a king, to open them anyway. "His wolf chose you the first day," he said, low, just for me, though the hall heard every word. "Without asking me. It always was ahead of me. I have been trying to catch up to it since you walked through a door you had no business opening." His thumb moved once over my knuckles. "I am asking now, late and badly, and in front of far too many people. Stay. Not as my healer. Stay." I looked at the king kneeling. No, standing. But he had knelt. They all saw him kneel, and I thought about the second cup, full now, and the frost that had stopped crawling, and the wolf asleep across my threshold, and the man who had rather bled for 2 years than risk a single soul in a dark room. "I told you the first night. I hadn't learned yet which jobs I was allowed to refuse," I said. The whole hall leaned in to hear the Omega answer the king. "I've decided I'm refusing this one. You don't get to be alone in the cold anymore. That's not a healer's order." I let him see me smile. "It's just advice you're not free to ignore." The gold wolf sat down between us and thumped its tail against the stone, insufferably pleased with itself, and the great hall of the Iron Territories, which had come to watch an Omega fall, watched instead the strongest wolf alive be caught, at long last, by the one person too new to know she was supposed to be afraid. They mated us under the next full moon, which is the proper way of it, and I will not describe that night, except to say that the second cup at the king's table has stayed full ever since, and that we drink to Aldrich before every meal, out loud, by name, so that no one in that hall ever again mistakes grief for something to hide behind a closed door. The wound closed. I want to be clear that it cost something, the night it finally knit. The cold came back, one last time, worse than before, the whole chamber white with frost and the air gone to stone in my lungs. The wolf's grief making its final argument, that to close the wound was to lose the hand that had held it. I held on. I put my own palm over the place where Aldrich's had been, and I told the wolf, out loud, that a hand does not have to stay pressed to a wound to have held it, that letting go is not the same as forgetting. And I do not entirely know whether it understood the words or only my refusal to leave. But the frost melted. The scar sealed under my hand, silver, shaped faintly like a palm. And it stayed that way, so that Halvar carries the mark of his brother's last choice on his ribs, healed instead of open, remembered instead of bleeding. He touches it sometimes without knowing he does. I never tell him. Some things you give a person by not watching. 6 months on, I am the Luna of the Iron Territories, which still strikes me as an administrative error no one has caught. I have a still room the size of my old village's chapel, and an apprentice of my own now, a frightened boy from the Eastern Holdings, whom I sent on his 4th day to the 3rd door in the healer's wing, with a tray of clean linen and instructions not to knock. He knocked. Of course he did. I chose him for it. A letter came last week from the village I grew up in, from the healer's mistress, who once told me I would never rise above soft hands and a soft throat. She had heard, she wrote, that an Omega girl from her own house had married a king, and she did not believe it, and could I confirm the rumour so she could put it to rest? I confirmed it. I did not gloat. Gloating and grace wear the same coat in my experience, and it is very hard to tell them apart from a distance. Easier up close, where you can see which one is smiling. Halvar found me writing the reply at his own table, in the seat at his right hand, which is not empty and never will be again, though there is still a full cup beside it that we do not drink from, because it is Aldrich's, and some places you keep set. "What are you telling her?" he asked, reading over my shoulder in the firelight, his wolf a warm gold weight against both our feet. "The truth," I said, "that no one told the new healer which patient to avoid, and that it's the best mistake I never made. So here is what I want to know, from you, before I close the door on this and let you go. Do you think his wolf knew what it was doing that first day in the hall, that it chose me on purpose, the way an animal chooses, sure of things the rest of us take 2 years and a poisoned cup to work out? Or do you think it was only grief, reaching for the nearest warm thing, and got luckier than any of us deserved? Tell me your theory below. I have lived inside the answer for 6 months now, and I still cannot decide. And if you want her story to keep going, the boy at the 3rd door, the letter yet to be answered, whatever walks up the length of the Great Hall next, comment the wolf and stay with me, because there is always another door in this fortress that someone has been told not to open. I have made a habit of opening them. Where are you listening from tonight? Pull up a chair. There is a cup, and it is full.